Okay, welcome. Welcome for this session on taking on climate, how women are leading the way. So during this session, we are really going to explore two sides of the issue and opportunity associated with women and climate. On one hand, women have demonstrated incredible leadership in their ability to drive action, in their ability to instigate collaboration, in tackling some of the adverse effect of climate change. On the other hand, women are the most vulnerable population and that are most likely to be affected by the adverse effect of climate. So these are sort of how shall I say, the two sides of that question that we're going to explore with my distinguished panelists. So I'm very glad to introduce you to my three panelists. To my left, I have Laurence Tubiana. Laurence Tubiana is a collective heroine for all of us, as we know the role she played as an architect of the climate agreement at the time of Paris. She's also now the CEO of the European Climate Foundation. Welcome, Laurence. To the left of Laurence, we have Alexandra Palt, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at LOreal, and he's a very sort of active commentator on the issues of climate and women. And to her left, we have Fanny Giancento. Fanny is an entrepreneur and who started a business called EcoTable, and she's been also very recently nominated as one of the Women for Climate C40 initiative. And she's going to tell us a few words about what she's doing there. So maybe I'll start with you, Fanny. If you could maybe tell me what led you to the C40 Women for Climate initiative, and how do you feel, in your view, it empowers women to exercise climate leadership?
Thank you very much, Sophie, for this question. And first, I would like to thank you and the Women Forum for inviting me. It's a great honor for me to be here with these amazing women talking about a subject that is very important to me. So first, I would like to recall what the C40 is. So C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group is an organization that gathered together 91 cities around the world, such as Paris, New York, Mexico, Cape Town, and so on. These cities represent 650 million of people over the world and 1/4 of the global economy. And all of these cities are fighting climate change in their own district. But the idea of the C40 is to create a network in order to act collectively. So it's a network that facilitates dialogue in order to share ideas, to share solutions, to share questions, and so on. So within this framework, the mayor of Paris, Anne Hidalgo, has developed an initiative as the first woman to lead the C40, which is called Women for Climate. So Women for Climate is a mentorship program designed for young women in C40 cities, which will contribute to the emergence of the next climate leaders. So you may wonder why focusing on women, why focus on women for a global issue that will impact everyone. For two main reasons. First, because women represent more than the half of humanity, and as I think Alexandra will develop after, women are more vulnerable to climate change. So because of this, it's vital that women are being implicating in order to fight for climate change. And the Women for Climate initiative has been built on this idea. It has been built on the idea that women are the strongest when it comes to generate change. And actually, it's particularly true when it comes to changing behavior of people. Because there is some research studies that indicate that when it comes to changing behavior, women are the strongest because they take care of household responsibilities. They take care of children, they take care of elderly people, and because of this, they have more influence on those around them. So, and it's also true when women are leaders. The main example is actually the Paris Agreement. Women did play a critical role when negotiating the Paris Agreement, and Laurence Tubiana is the best example of it. She leads the way to the Paris Agreement by being a key architect of the agreement. And in addition to this, women are also very good in addressing complex issues. When I talk about this, I always remember Christiana Figueres, who is also a key architect of the Paris Agreement, who was explaining last year in a conference in New York that women are really good to be climate leaders because they have two capacities. First, they can multitask, and second, they have a more natural tendency to project into the future. And I'm sure that every woman in this room will agree with me when I say that when you are in a heterosexual relationship, you tend to project more into the future than your partner. So anyway, the question is not whether women are better than men, but it's a fact that women are more implicated regarding environmental issues. And today, there are more and more women becoming climate leaders, but even if there are more and more women becoming climate leaders, there are still barriers for them to become leaders. And I also remember Giselle Cordestani, who is the founder of an organization called CrowdPack. So this is an open platform that aims to empower women to run for public office in the US. And she was explaining that women doesn't take the initiative to run for public office. They only do it if we ask them to do so. And this is why the Women for Climate Initiative has the ambition to empower women and inspire women in order to make them the next generation of climate leaders. And actually, Paris is the first city which launches the initiative. So we are 10 women who have been selected by the program. We have been selected in views our program and our ambition. We all have a mentor. For example, Alexandra is actually my mentor. And we all participate in international events, such as here today, the Women Forum, or last week, the Change Now Summit at the Station F, where 6 women have pitched their projects. So the ambition is to have 500 mentees all over the C40 cities in the next 3 years.
Great. So this is the leadership side of the question. Maybe you and then Alexandra, it'd be interesting to understand the other side, the empowerment of the women that have been affected by climate. Is that covered in the C40? And maybe Alexandra, you can take that first, and then maybe expand a little bit on that side of the argument.
Yes. Good afternoon to all of you. I'm a little bit sorry because I have a voice extinction, so I hope you are not bothered with that. So to start, perhaps a little bit why LOreal, how did we come to the issue of women for climate? This might be not obvious at the first sight. So LOreal is, of course, very committed to gender equality, and you all know how quite well positioned we are on gender equality within LOreal. But there is another issue is that we are also quite good in fighting climate change, thanks to a woman who is leading our industrial activity. We have reduced our own carbon emissions by -67%. So we have a lot of awareness on climate change and fighting climate change internally. And what we found out is more than half of our natural ingredients are coming from communities that are led by women, and women producing and harvesting natural ingredients. And these women, they are already affected by climate change. They are affected by climate change because these natural ingredients are, for example, Shear butter in Burkina Faso, argan oil in Morocco, other ingredients. And what we see and what has really drastically changed in the last years is that we see the effects of climate change now. A lot of people thought it will come later, that it's not our generation who is completely going to be confronted with that. And I'll give you a very concrete example. For example, argan oil in Morocco. There is desertification more and more, meaning, of course, threatening the process and the revenue of already very poor communities. So for LOreal, in our sourcing projects, we now always have a program to accompany these women to fight climate change or to adapt to climate change. How can they do that? They can, for example, grow other raw materials alongside, which in general helps to fight erosion of soils, which helps with water management, which helps with revenue. So this is something how we became very aware of the effects of climate change on women in a particular way. And they are not just going to be concerned as producers of raw materials. That's also, women are also very often responsible for the production of the food for the family. What is going to happen is that this is going to be more harder and harder. And they are also responsible for fetching the water. If there is less water available, they will go far away, which means that they are more subject to violence, because we know that the most dangerous places for girls and women is when they fetch water in developing countries, because there is most aggression happening. So there are numerous ways where women are going to be touched in a very particular way by climate change. Of course, also as primary caretakers of babies and children, more and more affected in their health by pollution. And so I think it's really both sides, as you said, of the matter of how can we empower women to be the leaders in fighting climate change and in adapting to climate change. But we also have to be aware in the policies that we develop within public policies, but also in private companies, that women are not concerned in a particular way. That doesn't mean that we do not also fight climate change when men are concerned, but you know, policies and actions that make sense have to be gender sensitive, and that's particularly true for climate change, and is kind of still a little bit not enough. People are not enough aware of these effects.
No, I mean, that's what I was going to say. All these ripple effect on health, on security, probably on education as well. It's something that certainly it's been very new to me when we had this briefing course. I mean, but what can be done about that? I mean, what are you doing? And I don't know whether this is within the realm of the C40 initiative, but what are your...
There are a lot of things that can be done, and I just would like to add that, of course, it's a collective responsibility for everybody. I think as a private company, of course, our first responsibility is how do we do our job, and in which way do we do the sourcing of raw materials, in which way are we using are we leading our production processes in industrial processes, and then of course we have a role to play in society. And I think there our responsibility is in different ways. You know, when you look into climate solutions, there is a very interesting book that has been written by I think 100 researchers on solutions to climate change. And they said, when you look into the 4 pillars, which will be the biggest solution, of course, you have agriculture, energy, transport, and the 4th is education of women and girls. Educating women and girls is going to be as important as changing the energy system and agriculture. So there is an enormous opportunity of involvement, of contribution to the society for a committed company like L'Oreal. And I think what we see is, and the partnership with the cities is so interesting, because companies are very agile. We move fast when we decide we do. We do not have elections every 4 years. We are not national governments that have to manage between unemployment and climate change. We can decide we want to move for that issue, and then we go. And cities are also very agile. They are very close to people. And so I think the partnership between us, L'Oreal as a company, and the C40 was the perfect demonstration of that, because we decided to do this together, and actually the program went off very fast, and this is part of a commitment from both sides. So C40 is doing a lot of other things on climate change, as are we doing a lot of other things, but this program is really an opportunity for us to raise awareness, to mentor young women that will provide solutions, concrete solutions, and that's always the same thing. You know, you will have 500 young women, but they will be the example for another thousands of young women who are going to follow.
You educate a woman, you educate a village. Laurence, can I ask you to maybe pick, if you can take the mic, you know, reflect on some of those points on the role of business in dealing with those issues that Alexandra just talked about, and cities.
Yes, just to add to what Alexandra and the new design member of C40 as a program, that really, I think the perception that women are more affected comes from the fact that, as Alexandra said, we now see the impact of climate change. and something which was like an opposition between the poverty alleviation and where all the issue, like in a way many businesses, philanthropy just concentrate on health for reproductive health for women, education, child mortality, maternity mortality. So that was a main way to look at women. And now, of course, because of the drought and agriculture, the extreme events and the impact of just the destruction on household entirely and the difficulty to rebuild them, and migration. You look at the numbers on migration these last 2 years, half of this flow of migrants are coming from consequences of climate change. And I can cite all the countries who are affected. And these are women and with small children who are in this terrible process of migration in, of course, the awful condition we know. So that's why I think now there is a perception, yes, this question and of poverty and women in particular is now totally connected with climate change. And by the way, because I'm not only a CEO of the European Climate Foundation, but president of the board of governors of the French Agency of Development, and the issues that we have to really integrate women issues in the way the agencies work, in particular on climate, again, is coming absolutely now as a natural evolution. So what business and cities can do, I think what is exciting after Paris, and again, of course, I'm very proud of what we did in Paris, but it was a beginning only. And again, very proud of what many women, all hands on deck, and some are there in the public, could do. But it was really the beginning. And now the issue since these last 2 years is to mobilize energy for the transformation of the economy. We are talking about not incremental change. We are talking about transformational change. And that's why I find finally women are better placed. Sophie, you know a lot of energy, and you remember 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, still the energy was it's still male-dominated field. And this comes with a certain past dependency. How you can understand change or project change when you have been in a sector where, you are between friends and you repeat the same thing over time. And because we need a transformation, that's why I think the women role is just to see why repeat the same mistakes. We can do totally differently. So that's why I think now the action is very much on who can decide quickly, take ambitious targets, and be able to implement them. And I think that in particular, the role of regions, the role of cities, and the role of business is key now to push government to be much more ambitious compared to what they finally agree in December 2015. Not the agreement. The agreement is really there has to stay, set the goal, well below 2 degrees C, carbon neutrality by the second half of the century, meaning we have to go very fast. We have to peak emission very early. And we have really to accelerate the rate. Government are, like Alexandra said, it's complicated. And sometimes they are very pessimistic about the capacity of society to evolve. And that's why we have to demonstrate them. They can be more courageous. They can dare more. And they even can dare more and be rewarded by that, which they are not always convinced by this. So that's why I see an enormous role for women in this new leadership. The local level is super important. The business level is super important. We have to check and challenge all the ones who pretend that we can continue like before. And I think that's absolutely our role.
So can I just ask you in the audience, who would like to be involved but doesn't necessarily know what to do? So how can people like us here, I mean, when I was introduced to the C40, I said, when are you coming to London? How can I get involved? What does it take to get involved? I mean, I'd love to hear your experience, Fanny, and how do you feel you are going to contribute? And is that going to be enough speed, enough scale? It sounds like a fantastic initiative, but it's probably going to take some time, and that's going to be in cities, in developed economies. So I just would like some reflection on those questions.
So about the initiative, we are 10 women, so we have 10 projects, and the aim of the initiative is to put forward this project. So for example, mine, it's a label called Equitable, which certifies and promotes sustainable restaurants and food shops. So the idea came from the fact that our food system doesn't work, but at the same time, we are more and more people living in cities. So cities face difficult challenges regarding the way we eat, because today, the food that is produced near cities is actually exported while we eat imported food. And the food we eat is generally of poor quality and responsible of soil and water pollution, public health issues, greenhouse gas emissions, and so on. Our food system is responsible of 25% of greenhouse gas emissions, so it's huge. And I truly think that one of the reasons of this catastrophic impact is a lack of connection between people and the means of production. And I thought, and I think it's particularly true for restaurants. I mean, I'm sure every one of you already went to a restaurant and asked yourself, where does my food come from? Where does my food come from, and what kind of negative impact it has on my health? So the idea of this label is to answer this question, is to inform customers about the environmental impact of restaurants and about the health impact of the restaurants. And it's to help restaurants in their ecological transition and to promote restaurants that does effort. So the whole idea is for our food system to become more local, to become more sustainable, and for people to have better food product for their health.
Understanding. Great. Thank you. But Alessandra, if you can respond to the second point I was raising about the C40 in the scale and speed.
Yeah, scale and speed is always insufficient. You know, if you think we are all small facing climate change. You know, that's always we have. If we start that, you know, then we wouldn't have started the LOreal to reduce our carbon emissions, because our carbon emissions of our industrial activity is 200,000 tons. So that's just nothing. And if you know all the effort we put in it to reduce it, you could say, well, that's no impact. So of course it's always insufficient, and we are always small when we look at climate change, at the enormous problem of climate change. But that is not something that we can put as an argument. What we need to try is to do projects that are scalable, that make bigger impact the more and more we progress. So that's the same thing. We started in Paris, we are going to Mexico City, we are going to Cape Town, so not just developed economies but also emerging economies. We are going to do this in 20, 30 cities, so this is going to make a difference. Because it's also about leadership. And then, of course, what as a company or as a more structural approach, what everybody should do, but that's more technical, is science-based targets. That's what companies are doing in the moment, looking at how can we transform our whole business model to look into an under 2-degree model. But that's a transformational change, as Laurence said. But still, I think that we have not one initiative is better than another. We need social change is happening by a lot of different elements. Of course, there is the illegal element, which we can say is the treaty of COP21. You have change that is coming to civil society, change that is coming through awareness raising and leadership from young women around the world, change that is happening through regulation. So change, we need all these elements to face the problem of climate change.
And if you look specifically at your supply chain, I remember you said to me, you know, this is not about us coming to help them. It's about us giving them the means to lead and to take control of their destiny with a better understanding of how it's going to be impacting them. Can you maybe give us an example of two?
I'm very happy to give you the example of the Shear butter in Burkina Faso, for example. But Shear butter is harvested for a very long time, for thousands of years. And women are doing it for thousands of years in the same way. They are taking the Shear butter. The first step of transformation is boiling the nut in hot water. Until now, this happens with firewood from the shear tree in the compound, affecting the health of the women, contributing to deforestation and contributing to an enormous amount of CO2 emissions. So what we try to do is to say, okay, you can do this perhaps in a different way, and we are going to help you, which will be better for your health, for your climate, for the maintaining of your activity. And so we provide them with stoves that allow them to they don't use firewood anymore coming from the shear tree, or a very little amount, and it's covered, which means that you don't have the CO2 emissions. So that was allowed us to reduce an enormous amount of CO2 emission with these women and having a positive impact on their health. And there are other projects, for example, in Morocco, where we explain, or in Bolivia, the quinoa, everybody, that's the superfood of the century. Quinoa, because it was coming so much into fashion, the farmers went down from the high levels, and they planted monocultures, and that led to the erosion of soils, to a very, very difficult situation. And so we found out that the husk of quinoa, what is around the quinoa, which you cannot eat, actually has cosmetic properties. And we started to buy this in addition to the quinoa that people buy for food. And that created an additional revenue. And we said, okay, we buy this if you use agricultural production methods, planting other things, planting trees, helping to fight against erosion, creating additional income. So we are doing this for a lot of our natural ingredients in order to change production processes, agricultural methods, going more into sustainable agriculture, more sustainable ingredients.
Great. Laurent, so how do we keep the momentum? How do we keep the momentum and get to that speed and scale that we need to get to? And what is the part, from the woman leadership point of view, that how do you empower women and get women to contribute?
That's clear. We need now a new direction. Again, Paris was giving a framework, and at the same time, it was, in a way, different constituencies taking different commitments. The governments on one side, the cities, the regions, the investors, the business. But now we need something much more integrated, because we need, in a way, to construct, again, from the incremental, everyone reducing emission by a certain date, to a vision what the economy, the society, the cities at each level will look like by 2050, for example. That will be compatible with a well below 2-degree scenario. And we need to imagine that, because numbers of emission reduction doesn't mean anything. If you don't know what transport is about, and what the food consumption is about, and how you heat your home, and how in a way you behave. So we need that. So first we need a sense of direction and a big effort from everyone to imagine these societies and to begin to socialize that vision. Because again, people will not mobilize or not make the choices, and I can come to the individual responsibility too, if we don't know where it goes and what it looks like, and to understand that it could be a perfectly livable cities and livable countries. Just take the example of the battle around air quality and cars and private cars. We see that slowly people are considering that maybe we can change the model. Maybe we can go from, yes, more efficient car, less pollution, to something that will be a total disruptive change. And that, when you will make your decision of the next car you buy, if you have, I don't have a car from now many years, or really the transport you will choose, you will see how it can really be materialized into a totally different cities where you have no noise and no air quality problems. And that's the same for many issues. So that's my first target, that we collectively, and L'Oreal business and the other big, of course, L'Oreal does his work very seriously, but Total has to do it, Shell and the cement companies, everyone, which is of course difficult to imagine that. Then I think and this creating a positive loop, which is the second point. Why it's important that everyone just begin to think about that. And food is a very good example, because you can make choice immediately. And transport, sometimes it's a little more difficult because you have to have access to something. But then, if you do that, if you in your household, in your sort of dwelling with the people who are living in the district, I met 2 weeks ago a fantastic writer, Marie Desplechin. 1 week ago, we were in France Culture, and she told that she was so appalled by the problem of climate change, and she decided to do something in her district. So they now have in her small district a climate plan. I think that's the best way, not because it, as Alexandra said, we are always small, but then it gives you a sense of the demand you have to make on the policymakers. And that's why they are changing their views, not because they are just illuminated, just because the pressure is being felt more and more. And that's true at national level, that's true at global level. Just look at what happened after Trump's decision to withdraw from Paris Agreement. Everybody said, we're still in, even in US. And you have now the fantastic thing that in United States, the society said, you may in Washington decide you are not in. We are in. In November, in the COP in Bonn, the people will come, Jerry Brown, many others, Schwarzenegger will come and say, we are still in, we are doing the job. So that's fantastic. That's the only way to get there, to have at scale, is that this commitment, the initiative on the ground, give legitimacy to put the pressure on the government.
So do you think there's enough leadership to do what you said we need to do, that vision, that...
I'm concerned. I'm concerned because that's not that easy. We see, again, a lot of fragmented leadership, very distributed leadership, but you need a more central one. That's what it's important that Europe really stands up, rally again around Europe, more initiatives. I think, I don't know. I think I lost. No. So I suppose you hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
And it's really important that Germany, France, and others stand up and say we have to continue together, not only with government, with the cities, with the region. And I see Michelle here. She knows that we have to make the links between the region and the governments. But yes, I'm pressuring everyone I can that we need political leadership as well. And that's something I think the German Chancellor and the French President has to deliver in the next months.
Great. Final thoughts, unfortunately, and I'm sorry I haven't been able to give you the flow, but my question, so in thinking about taking action and daring to lead, you're doing a lot already, obviously, but if you can project into the future, each of one, and how can we empower women to amplify the impact at both ends of the spectrum, as leaders of action and as women that have been impacted by climate? Maybe we start by you, Fanny, if you can do it very quickly because we're going to be told off otherwise.
Well,
5 minutes, okay, good. You can take your time. Or maybe we can get a question actually as well, which would be good. But go ahead, please.
I will have a word for financial actors, because I think it's true that women have to lead, and we should dare to lead, but we're not the only one. And I think financial actors should dare to finance women-owned businesses and social businesses, because today more than ever we need women businesses to flourish and social businesses with great social impact to flourish as well.
Great. No, that's a great point. Thank you.
I have to admit that the question is too big for me, because I think there is something, what I really ask myself, I've worked on this kind of question for almost 20 years, either social or environmental issues, and I really don't understand yet, how do we come to a tipping point? How do we come to a tipping point where a new model is becoming the new normal? And even if we see that more on gender issues, for example, I think we have reached a tipping point. But on environmental issues, I'm still frightened somehow when I see the lack of awareness that you can see in establishment, in financial establishment or in others. So I think, how are we going to come to the tipping point where people are going to understand that if we want not to go to the disaster, we have to be transformational, we need a new normal. And I haven't got the answer yet. I'm really looking, and I'm always trying to find people who can advise me on that. So if you have answers, please come and see me afterwards. But I think it's multi-channel that is going to lead to this change, but it's not governments. We can see that. It's not an international organization. It's not going to be business alone because we are depending on an ecosystem. So perhaps it's going to be a revolution. We'll see.
Interesting, because clearly what we've done before hasn't worked, because there's been a lot of evidence, there's been a lot of scientific evidence, there's something that we haven't cracked yet.
I think so.
Thank you.
On the other side, I'm in there, of course, I'm just older than you. And really, when I compare where we were in 1992 and where we are now, we are not in the same world. So it's long, it's difficult. But an industrial revolution doesn't take 10 years to take place, no, 20 years. It's more than that. And I think it's coming. The second thing on the leadership of women, I think we have to make all these women visible. The communication impact is really important. Just I refer to the fantastic campaign that you have done at L'Oreal on women in science. I think make these women visible. Just allow the younger one to say, well, I could be like this. I can tell. And some students are probably around, and I have some in the room. Now, when I go in a global negotiation, or I remember being in Davos, in the street, eating in the snow, and one incredible young leader told me, Professor, and she was one of these young women who were in Sciences Po working, and my students, I find them everywhere now, at the French Agency of Development, at World Bank, at private companies, and they are so making them visible, which is exactly what C40 initiative L'Oreal is. I think that's absolutely key.
Wonderful. Do you have time for one question? Anybody wants to take one question? Please go ahead. Do you want to give the mic?
One of the main drivers for climate change, if you will, is the increased amount of consumption, right? And I know that in most households, well, even in my household, women tend to control or try to have control on consumption for the household. And I wonder, and I apologize because I know that L'Oreal is a company that builds products, and we do want to have, we need products, and we need diversity of ideas and products. But how do we curb that moment from when you have 5 lipstick choices to 700,000 lipstick choices? I mean, that we can make everything as sustainable as possible, but do we need to actually make them, I think is a question.
I'm sorry, I'm voice. Can you answer with this mic? That left me a little bit of time now. I have to, every actor in this field of fighting climate change is coming from a specific place. I'm not going to tell you that L'Oreal is going to work on a degrowth model. This is not the place where we can be in the moment. If we would do that, then we would not work on sustainability, because we are not a social entrepreneur. We are not an NGO. We are a business. We have to make business in the market. What we try to do is business to transform our business in a way that we can align with the 2-degree scenario, that we can align with another different world, and that we can give sustainable consumption choices to consumers. Meaning that you will have still a lot of lipstick choices, but perhaps you will do refill, or you will change just the lipstick that is in there. So we are working on opportunities like this, which will allow us probably to transform while still stay competitive, which is the reason why we are here.
Great. Well, please join me in thanking our speakers, and see you promptly at what? 4:15, is that right? 4:15 for the plenary. Thank you very much.